Hey YouTube, it's Magician34, and this is my Double Summon Machina Gadget deck version 2. This is legal for the new format, as you'll see when you go down the list. It's changed very little since last time, mainly because it's actually a very consistent deck. It's very good. Also, it's essentially a budget deck. I didn't design it to be a budget deck, but with the exception of the extra deck, which is highly subject to change, arguably you don't even need an extra deck for this deck since it doesn't have any tuners in it. And there's only one way to steal, or two ways to steal tuners anyway. I mean, you don't have to have one, but I strongly recommend it. But at any rate, it's incredibly easy to build, very consistent, relatively easy to play. So let's get down to it. Okay, I do run 3 copies of each gadget, 3 green gadget, 3 red gadget, and 3 yellow gadget. And the reason we run 3 of each is just to make sure we hit one, because that's 9 cards out of 40, so that's slightly less than a 1 in 4 chance of hitting a gadget when you're just drawing randomly out of your deck, which means that out of your 5 card opening hand plus your 6th card that you draw, you should have a gadget. And we also run 3 Gear Frame, which is just as good a summon because he's another self-replacing card. And we also run 3 copies of the Fortress, which goes with him. And after that, probably the most expensive cards in the deck, which isn't saying much. 1 copy of Gores, and 1 copy of Tragoedia. That's it. Still a 17 monster count. And the rest is all spells and traps. We're going to run 1 Monster Reborn. Very preferable to Brain Control, which dropped off the list. Brain Control can be good in this deck, sure. But Monster Reborn is virtually always good, and in a pinch you can even use it to reanimate a gadget, and use it to search for another gadget in case your chain of gadget to gadget to gadget gets broken up. So yeah, definitely a must in this deck. It's also a good way to get beat sticks or even steal tuners to sync. It's probably your main method of doing it. I'm running 1 copy of MST. You can run 2, but largely gadgets don't fear most of your opponent's back rows. So it's almost in here more as just a what-if precaution thing. It's essentially replacing Heavy Storm, rather than just being 1 floating MST. We are still running 3 copies of Double Summon, mainly because it just aggresses you through your deck that much faster. The idea is to always have the monsters in your hand, and the top deck into spells and traps. And Double Summon does that, plus it puts a little more heat on the field. Actually, a surprisingly useful card in this deck. It's the only time I've ever found Double Summon to be a worthwhile card, but hey, you only need 1 good deck to be a good card, right? 3 copies of Book of Moon. It interferes with your opponent's thinking, and can also allow gadgets to kill things. Still a really crucial card, and as the format slows down, this becomes more effective at stopping your opponent's key plays. We're also running 1 copy of Limiter. This can easily give you game just by damage, and you can also use it to trade with your opponent's monsters by killing them and inflict damage at the same time. And you don't care if most of your monsters die because they're self-replacing. They already put the gadget in your hand, it's going to replace them next turn, in other words. We definitely run Dark Hole. This is pretty much a no-brainer. It's monster removal. You can certainly use it to kill one guy, but you can always clean a field. It's very good against stuff like X-Sabers. Yada yada. And we're running 3 copies of Smashing Ground, and 3 copies of Fissure still. GBs are definitely looking like they might be a ferocious deck, and they don't like Fissure and Smashing Ground particularly, so it's good for you. And amazingly, I usually find myself wanting to draw them even more, but we are just going to run 2 copies of Pot of Avarice, because 3 might give us some bad opening hands. Very good card in this deck, cycles your gadgets and back in and whatnot. Really good, really solid. And you load monsters into your grave really quickly. 6 traps, Torrential Tribute, 2 bottomless trap holes, still a very good card in this format. And we've shifted the 1 Mirror Force and 2 Dimension Prisons just to 3 Dimension Prisons straight up, because Dimension Prison tends to be more useful pound for pound, and I find that oftentimes there's really only like 1, maybe 2 offending monsters tops. So the removal of Prison outweighs just a destroy effect of Mirror Force. You don't have to agree with it, and you can certainly run Mirror Force if you want, but I've found that 3 Prisons is actually better. And of course, needless to say, it's a good way to answer Stardust Dragon, who can otherwise be a real problem for this deck. And the extra deck, once again, Tragoedia, Monster Reborn, the only 2 ways you're ever going to sync, because they're the only ways to steal tuners from your opponent. So really, it's kind of your choices here for the most part. A Scrap Dragon, Stardust Dragon, Red Dragon Arcfiend, Colossal Fighter, Thought Ruler Arcfiend, Black Rose Dragon. You're really only ever likely to sink once if you sink at all in a game, so 1 odds are pretty much the rule here. You're looking for options over the ability to reproduce a threat. Scrap Arcfiend. Of course, you can always pot of Avarice if you really need to use the same guy more than once. Armor Master, Exaber Rebellum, Goya Guardian, Brynac, Naturia Beast, Magical Android, Ally of Justice Cataster, and the only one I'd say you probably ought to be running, especially now since it just came out as a promo, is Chimeratech Fortress Dragon. You can pull one of those guys to add a second copy of him if you really want to, since Cyber Dragon did go to 2. I don't think you'll see like a crazy amount of Cyber Dragons, but still just enough to justify running this guy. He's a great way to just straight up create card advantage out of nowhere. Plus he can be very sizable depending on the circumstances. So yeah, good card. Alright, and until next time, rate, comment, subscribe, and enjoy.